and welcome to the coronavirus lockdown live stream, the show that brings welcome levity to the end of the world, lifting the spirits of many of you currently in self-isolation by infecting as many as possible with comfort and distraction as the apocalypse unfolds. How are we all today? I hope the audio and video is functional. Please let me know in the comments if there are any problems. Debbie Aquino says, good morning from California. Hope everyone is well. I am quite well, thank you, Debbie. Jasmine, is it Apers? Says, hoping I can stay awake almost 3 a.m. here in New Zealand. Gosh, that is late. I would be going to bed if I were you, Jasmine. No lie. But well done for trying to soldier through it. Denise Bartlett says, good morning from Florida. Hope all is well. Good morning to you, Denise. Louise Reynolds is signing in from Wiltshire, UK, hoping the kitten makes a cameo appearance today. I guess Olivia is still settling in. I did contemplate bringing her down to the bunker, but she was napping when I saw her earlier, and I thought I don't want to disturb her, but she will be making an appearance soon, I promise. Alice Scott says morning from Quadra Island. Karina May is saying hello from hilly Lancashire. Wow, fantastic. Not so far from where I grew up, so lovely to hear from I was going to say my home country, but of course now I am Croatian as well. The country of my birth, let's say. Nilda Gomez is hailing from Miami. Hello, Nilda. Simon Instone finds something trippy. Good to see you, Simon. Sid Whittle is sending greetings from El Dorado Hills, California. Nathan Kincaid is in the house. Ben Rancourt, who's been on the channel, he did one of the Fade Interrupted series. Nice to see Ben. Elsie Firth says good afternoon from West Yorkshire. Nice to see you too, Elsie. Eric Larson is signing in from muggy Louisiana. Nicole Mort Parker signing in from Florida. There's lots of you. 66 watching across Facebook and Twitch as I speak. Barnabas Collins, whose avatar always makes me smile. Bears engaged in some kind of fracas. So still half asleep in California. Anyone else not able to comment after Arthur's song last time? Yes, I'm glad you raised that. As we said at the time, Arthur's song broke the live stream because he was doing Hotel California. And as those of you who are familiar with the song will know, quite a lot of Hotel California is just instrumental. And Arthur chose a karaoke track that was very close to the original. So for large portions of his segment, we were literally just playing the Eagles. And so we got absolutely hammered for copyright. And the live stream went down for a number of different countries. Facebook did it in a weird way, I think, depending on... Oh, no, that's right. I think the Facebook live stream crashed entirely, and we were left only with Twitch viewers for the last live stream. So I've explained things to Arthur. Hopefully by the time we are on YouTube, because we actually, I won't say return to YouTube because the lockdown live stream has always been on Facebook, but we're going to be promoted to YouTube after the 16th. So Arthur is aware that he needs to get his game in order in terms of copyright. And basically he needs to choose karaoke versions that are as far removed from the original as possible, especially if there are long instrumental sections. Jacek says, as always, greetings from Poland. Hello, Jacek. Bob Oak is registering his attendance. It's done that thing where it leaps forward again. Always irritates me when I'm scrolling through the comments. And suddenly it takes me like to the bottom and I've got to find where I'm up to. There we are. Benjamin says, good morning from New York State. Good morning, Benjamin. I approve of your young ones ask mug. Paige Lundy is saying hello, as is Paul, who's signing in from Virginia. We've got Eric. Actually, I think I've already said Eric. We've got Rachel Keith McCullough from Florida. Lots of people, lots of you here. Thank you so much for all of the incredible messages. I'm just scrolling through some of them now. Yeah, Nathan says that audio sounds great, unfortunately. Sorry to disappoint you there, Nathan. Same from Paul, so that's good to know. Right, well, we have our green room assembling, and it's an Aussie-dominated green room so far, you'll be pleased to hear, with a special guest, I notice. So stay tuned for that. But as is customary, we begin today's show with a reading from the book Take Back Your Life, Recovering from Cults and Abusive Relationships by Anya Lalich and Madeline Tobias. Not yesterday. In the previous show, we were learning about the role of emotions in our lives and the role of emotions in cults. Today, we're going to learn all about emotions you may feel when you come out of a cult. Inside a cult, members learn to survive by denying and suppressing their feelings. Once they leave, they may be flooded with emotions that are difficult to identify or deal with. The return of spontaneous feelings is both good news and bad news. You can begin to make sense of your emotions by categorizing them using the basic classifications of bad, sad, mad, and glad. Start by asking yourself how you feel, describe it. If you can't name it, write about it or draw it. Keep a journal. Many people consider this one of the best aids to healing. Gradually, you will find that your feelings, which at first seemed chaotic and indecipherable, begin to make sense. You don't have to do anything with them, just observe, feel, and perhaps write about them. You neither have to judge them nor get rid of them, even if they feel bad. Some people believe that freedom of thought or the ability to choose one's attitude or feelings about anything is the most essential of the human freedoms. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, believed that a person's freedom to choose a way of thinking and feeling was something even the Nazis couldn't take away. Sadly, for people living in some of today's more extreme thought reform cults, that most basic freedom can be taken away or at least temporarily suppressed. Regaining freedom of thought can be liberating, disorienting, and even frightening. But before you can regain your freedom, you have to acknowledge that you lost it. Grief and mourning. This is a long section, but I'll try and get a few headings through it. Grief is a common reaction. After an initial period of shock and denial, feelings of grief will surface as the full impact of the loss or harm you experienced sets in. Leaving a cultic group or abusive relationship means experiencing and confronting various losses, such as, and then there's a list, loss of the group, of a sense of belonging, of commitment, and of goals, loss of time, for some, loss of their youth, and a sense of excitement about life, loss of innocence, naivete, or idealism, loss of meaning in life, loss of one's spirituality or belief system, loss of family and loved ones, loss of self-esteem, or loss of pride in oneself. We will look at each of these losses in order to understand its potential effect on your emotional life. Being able to accept your losses is an important step in moving forward. Loss of the group. In the cult, you probably experienced camaraderie, support, and a sharing of ideals and goals. You felt a sense of purpose in life. You may also have experienced fear and pain, hardship, or misery. All of these experiences create a strong bond between people. No doubt you formed friendships that were difficult to leave behind. People who spend more than a year or two in a cult may not have old friends or family outside the cult to go back to. Those bridges may have burned long ago. People who were raised in a cult may know few, if any, folks on the outside. The cult may be their only link to the world. However certain you may have been about your decision to leave, it is natural to feel alone and lonely once you actually do leave. It's natural to mourn the loss of your group. Sadness and confusion are normal emotions at this time. Humans are social animals, and you are not regressing if you find that you miss what you left behind. Try not to deny or denigrate your feelings of loss. They're natural. Black and white thinking styles may prevent some former members from acknowledging the good that may have resulted from the cult experience. You may have gained specific skills or certain types of knowledge, and you may have created important relationships with other members. The apparent contradiction of having positive feelings about the experience may throw some former members into despair or confusion. Being part of an intense group dynamic, even a bad one, or an intimate relationship, even an abusive one, is a unique experience. However exploitative or manipulative the encounter may have been, most likely there was something good there, or you probably would not have been attracted to the group or person in the first place. Sometimes that something good may have kept you in the situation longer than you would have stayed otherwise. When you're ready, it will be truly healing for you to examine those positive aspects as fully as possible. By looking for the good parts of your cult experience, you will be able to relieve your sense of loss so that it won't overcome you or, worse yet, drive you back to the group or abusive relationship or another one just like it. In the following chapters, you'll be able to evaluate your experience and use what you learned to build a healthy future. And then loss of time. Mourning the loss of youth or years of life because of time spent in a cult is an unhappy but widespread experience. Trading away a college education or stable career for menial work, fundraising, or begging for a cult can be a source of bitter regret for many. Any time spent in a cult, whether months or years, is time lost from loving, living, and growing on your own. Often people who come out of cults or isolating relationships need to catch up on life, to learn about technological advances, career possibilities, cultural trends and differences, political and societal changes, current colloquial expressions, trends, and fashion. For people raised in a cult, the knowledge and culture gap may be dramatic. For these reasons, many former cult members feel as though they have just come out of a time warp or arrived from another planet. They often feel completely out of step, struggling to assess and integrate their cult experience, deal with the present, and build a future in an unfamiliar, seemingly new world. They may feel disjointed and out of sync with others in their age group or socio-cultural milieu. They may also need to sort out identity issues. See chapter 10. So we've gone 2 items through the list, and on Wednesday's show, we will be learning all about loss of innocence, naivete or idealism, loss of meaning. Well, we'll see how far we get through the list, but isn't that interesting? So much of that was directly applicable to the experience of being in Jehovah's Witnesses, as I'm sure many of you will agree. Bob Oak says, did Lloyd say the author will join him for an interview at some stage? Hearing them discuss our particular cult would be so helpful for so many. I did reach out to Yenya Lalich, and we were on the cusp of an interview at one point, but it just didn't quite happen. But I will keep trying. I suppose there's also Madeline Tobias, isn't there? So who knows? We shall see. I'll keep plugging away at that. Nathan Kincaid. Is Nathan going to be serious? I have to wonder as I launch into this comment. I agree with this reading. Thoughts and feelings are so confused. That with being lonely makes this a dangerous time to fall for different but equally damaging modes of thinking from other types of cults. Wow, Nathan, you impressed me. I was expecting you to say something entirely inappropriate and flippant, but yeah, that's a very trenchant observation that you make there. So yeah, I enjoyed that reading, and now we bring in the green room, which is comprised of Sasha, who appears to be in paradise, and yeah, there we are. You have Sasha, Sherry, Auntie Bev. Hello, all of you.
Hello. Hello.
Hey, everyone.
Auntie Bev, I hope you realise just how much of a cult hero you have become since your brief appearance towards the end of the Fade Interrupted episode. Lots of people resonating with your unique way of processing things. So welcome to the show. And we're also joined by Arthur. Hello, Arthur. So
hello, everyone.
Hey, Arthur.
So perhaps Sasha...
Copyright infringer himself.
Yes, here he is.
The hooded bird catcher.
No, I can't hear you, Arthur.
If you can show...
You can't hear me? Why you can't hear me? I don't know.
No, Arthur,
no, we can hear you.
Oh,
I can't hear Arthur.
Yeah, that's because...
No, you can't, Sasha.
No.
We can.
But Sasha can hear everyone else.
Log off and log on again.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, Sherry and Auntie Bev, please tell us about why you're all together and what's happening at your side of things.
Why are we together? We are together because in Australia we have a long weekend this weekend, which is fabulous. And it also combines with a few very important things, one of which is a lightening of lockdown restrictions so that we can visit one another, which is fabulous.
Sure is.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing, which is really big, and I want everyone to make a huge to-do about it, is that on the 8th and the 9th, dates to be decided on, it's Auntie Bev's 80th birthday.
Wow. Lovely.
Wow.
You can believe it.
That's amazing.
Yes, it is amazing.
It is. Yes, I'm still here.
Did you say 18th? Did you say 18th
Oh, yes,
birthday?
yeah, 18, yes, 1 8, darling, yes. Not 80.
It's outstanding that you don't show your age.
Oh, thank you,
I tell you
darling,
what, I
too.
want Auntie Bev's jeans.
Yeah.
I think we need to find a way. Medical science needs to find a way of harnessing whatever it is that's giving Auntie Bev so much energy and spirit. I honestly, I want some of that, please. So if you can arrange that.
Actually, I also want to state that my grandma turned 80 on the 17th of May.
There
We
you
should
go.
have a lockdown live stream hosted by Auntie Bev and Arthur's grandma, I think.
Yes.
Unfortunately, she can't speak English.
Oh.
But
We're struggling at the best of times anyway.
We can do subtitles or simultaneous translation.
There's a slight lag for me on the audio. I don't know whether that's coming across for you guys, but yeah, there's a slight lag. So if I seem a little bit out of sync with everyone, I apologize. Testing. So you mentioned that there's been an easing of restrictions in Australia. One thing I was wondering, because I've done the drive from Sydney to Auntie Bev's. Auntie Bev has a marvelous residence. on the waterfront, no less.
Yes.
And I'm interested to know, given the wildfires that you guys had, what's that drive like now? So are there long stretches where you're driving past charred remains of woodland and that kind of thing?
Well, not where I am, but further south, yes, it's still pretty bad. Although lots of green shoots and leaves coming on the trees now, much better than what it was. It was devastating, absolutely devastating. But people are moving on and rebuilding, and it's going on. So we're moving on.
And
It's like the pandemic.
probably after the wildfires. Probably after the wildfires were over, you guys were saying, well, 2020 can't get much worse.
We had some floods in between.
They've got the pandemic.
Wow.
Yeah, we certainly had a go of it. They've just announced that Australia's in recession now. I mean, like everywhere else. But yeah, it's been a pretty full-on year.
Yes,
I think
it has.
earlier on this year, Auntie Bev's place was under ember attack during all of those bushfires. It was just, we'd never seen anything like it.
And then floods.
And then floods.
Yeah.
We didn't. I didn't have a flood, but I'm fine.
No, but we did have floods
Yeah.
throughout the state, and then a pandemic, and it's it's been a
And
crazy
my
year.
birthday.
And your birthday. I mean, hey.
It's almost like the apocalypse.
Lip Locked No More says Auntie Bev is 17 going on 18. and Nathan Kincaid says, damn, nobody told me Auntie Bev was such a hottie.
She lost a hearing piece.
Just at the crucial moment.
Thoughts on that, Auntie Bev?
I couldn't hear you. What was that?
Oh, see? You're a hottie.
Oh, that's nice to know, seeing I'm only 19.
So I think we need to sort out our camera angles. Auntie Bev is currently obscured by the coronavirus lockdown live stream logo. And Lip Locked No More is requesting, Sasha, let's see, that you alter your camera angle so that you're less dominated by the paradise.
Is it triggering, is it?
We want to see your face, basically. Yeah.
Yes, and we want
swap me with Annie Bev and Sherry, and I can duck out.
Can you not angle it down at all, the camera?
Yep.
Yeah, just angle it. And
I can do.
Yes, that's much
I
better.
noticed he's got a teddy bear strategically placed too. Did you see that?
Yeah, got a teddy bear. Yeah.
Yes. And actually, with Sasha being so present, his picture behind him really triggers us about the wonderful blessings that will come upon.
Unfortunately, we've lost Arthur's audio.
Yes!
Well, if you look closely, there's a panda there, so the panda padding paradise, and
and the wonderful river that's flowing out of the throne of
that's it, Arthur.
of Jehovah and the Lamb.
Enough of all this triggering nonsense. It's time we had an infusion of sophistication and culture, and there's only one segment that can give us that.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you to our friend of the show, Simon Instone, who sent through a couple of poems. So I'll share his first of all, and then I'll go to mine after that. A couple of short ones. Indoctrinating the young ones is our game. It helps keep our numbers roughly the same. For all that we said, to get in your head, we are completely to blame. All right.
Very good.
Sorry for messing that up, Simon. All right, and another little one, just current events that he's shared with us. See if you can work out who it's about. Down in my butt outside, out went the lights because they gave me a fright. I just sat in the corner and cried.
I missed a little bit of that. Could you repeat it? Sorry.
Sure.
Yeah.
Down in my bunker I'd hide when there were people outside. Out went the lights because they gave me a fright. I just sat in a corner and cried.
Yeah, I think that's about someone else who has a bunker, not me.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
You'll say.
Yeah.
It's actually about the three L's. It's about the three L's. Lloyd's lovely limerick.
I love it. All right. Well, now I've got another one that might be more appropriate for most of our audience, given the background that we've all come from. All right. How do we determine real truth from lies? Do gut feelings, facts, or logic make us realize whether something is true or something is erroneous, whether things we are taught are felonious or harmonious? Take, for example, the faith we held dear, one that taught of a paradise with nothing to fear, a religion that taught that millions living would never die, those Bible students would proclaim with a heartfelt cry. They said they based this message on God-given facts, and the message appealed to many. Yes, it acted to attract thousands into their fold, into their religious cult. And what was the effect on generations? Yes, what was the result? Well, millions then living did in fact pass away. So the cult leaders simply moved the goalposts to say that other end times would surely prove to be precise, like 1975, which would bring a new world paradise. And once again, their message proved to be nothing but wrong, yet many followers remained with them as a mindless, blinded throng. Consistently, we've seen their message of Armageddon and good news prove false and unfounded, yet oddly we're confused to see many remain enthralled by the message they espouse. So it's clear that cult followers don't choose to use their nous. They remain in their bubble, determined to believe fairy tales of hope, on these they do cleave. But for those who value truth, this should spur us to employ our reasoning minds to steer our lives. Yes, facts we'll enjoy, motivated by sincerity and eagerness to seek ways to thrive every day, indeed grow every week. So grasp your real life, defined by truth be enhanced, live free of cultish thinking, control your own circumstance.
Oh, very nice.
Thank you.
Very nice indeed.
That is such a true and real description of
Thanks, Brother Leif.
of our beloved religion, dear brothers and sisters.
You muted the wrong one.
I was a bit slow to mute him there.
Yeah, you muted me.
Oh, I muted you, did I? I need a producer. Yeah.
Brandon, where are you?
Eric Larson says, a poem about paradise from paradise.
That's very true, Eric.
And we are joined by another panelist. It's Kimmy.
Hello.
Kimmy, welcome.
Kimmy!
How are you,
Hi.
Kimmy?
Good. I was just, I'm at my father's, and so I was trying to figure out how to get his webcam so I could actually see myself, and then I had no sound. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. Nice picture as well.
And thank you, Kimmy, for solving one big issue in our show today.
Which is?
Now, Auntie Beth's face is not obscured by
Arthur's is. And Arthur's
logo.
expendable. Arthur's expendable, so that's fine.
Hey, Kimmy, the big question we have is, do you have a cat to present to us this
I have no
broadcast?
cats. My father is not a cat person.
We don't have a cat, but we do have another O'Donnell in the form of... we have a dog as well.
Mark can provide all the cats you need. Mark, do you have a cat?
We need a cat, Mark.
Sorry, I had to kill my audio here because I had the Facebook was on. Sorry. We can find a cat at some point. Yes,
we need a cat.
Well, in the meantime, we can go to the ends of the earth with our following segment.
Are you literally trying to dictate the order of the show now?
I think somebody is hijacking the show.
Someone is really getting ahead of himself. And after sabotaging our last live stream, which ended up with Facebook not being able to watch and just being solely on Twitch.
Charlie.
Oh, there's a cat. Fantastic.
Hey.
Now, in case in case this video is being watched by a manual reviewer on YouTube, you will note that this is in fact a cat video.
This is a cat video.
Mark here is Mark. Tell us about this cat and any tips to our audience on how to maintain cats.
Well, Charlie, would you like to add something?
Very wise.
I'd like to say hello, everyone, and I love being on the Dog Seaters channel. I love Sherry and Sasha and Lloyd, and I don't know about that Arthur guy. I don't like them.
I love you already, Charlie.
That's
the wisest stuff we've ever had on our broadcast.
Arthur,
yes, Lloyd.
are you ready to go with the sing along with Arthur?
Yes, of course I am.
Well, that's a shame because I'm going to do a different segment instead. Sherry's Comfort Corner.
Charlie.
Honey Bev, what were your thoughts on that intro?
It's coming straight up. I'm going to be fishing if I didn't want that.
Just to explain, Auntie Bev, I was a little bit confused when I was making that intro as to whether this was a comfort corner or a fear corner. So I kind of went with both in the end. But hopefully Sherry's going to comfort us all so that will negate the fear element. So
Sherry's fear factor.
Well, I'll do my best. So everyone, I have a little more on self-compassion for everyone this evening, this morning, whatever time we're all in. Last time I spoke about self-compassion and talked about the definition of it. This time I'm going to talk about what self-compassion is not. So 3 things that self-compassion is not. And we all have a very big need to be compassionate to ourselves. So the first thing is that self-compassion is not self-pity. I'm going to read a little bit here. When individuals feel self-pity, they become immersed in their own problems and forget that others have similar problems. They ignore their interconnections with others and instead feel that they are the only ones in the world who are suffering. Self-pity tends to emphasize egocentric feelings of separation from others and exaggerate the extent of personal suffering. Self-compassion, on the other hand, allows one to see the related experiences of self and other without these feelings of isolation and disconnection. Also, self-pitying individuals often become carried away with and wrapped up in their own emotional drama. They cannot step back from their situation and adopt a more balanced or objective perspective. In contrast, by taking the perspective of a compassionate other towards oneself mental space is provided to recognize the broader human context of one's experience and to put things in greater perspective. Yes, it's very difficult what I'm going through right now, but there are many other people who are experiencing much greater suffering. Perhaps this isn't worth quite getting so upset about. So that's the first thing, that self-compassion is not self-pity. Secondly, self-compassion is not self-indulgence. Self-compassion is also very different from self-indulgence. Many people say they are reluctant to be self-compassionate because they're afraid they would let themselves get away with anything. I'm stressed out today, so to be kind to myself, I'll just watch TV all day and eat a quart of ice cream, which I can totally get.
Yeah.
Okay. This, however, is self-indulgence rather than self-compassion. Remember that being compassionate to oneself means that you want to be happy and healthy in the long term. In many cases, just giving oneself pleasure may harm well-being, such as taking drugs, overeating, being a couch potato, while giving yourself health and lasting happiness often involves a certain amount of displeasure, such as quitting smoking, losing weight, exercising, hard work. People are often very hard on themselves when they notice something they want to change because they think they can shame themselves into action, the self-flagellation approach. However, this approach often backfires if you can't face difficult truths about yourself because you are so afraid of hating yourself if you do. Thus, weaknesses may remain unacknowledged in an unconscious attempt to avoid self-censure. In contrast, the care intrinsic to compassion provides a powerful motivating force for growth and change, while also providing the safety needed to see the self clearly without fear of self-condemnation. My goodness, there was so much in that. And finally, this one I think is really powerful because we often mistake self-compassion for this. Self-compassion is not self-esteem. This is something totally different. Although self-compassion may seem similar to self-esteem, they are different in many ways. Self-esteem refers to our sense of self-worth, perceived value, or how much we like ourselves. While there is little doubt that low self-esteem is problematic and often leads to depression and lack of motivation, trying to have higher self-esteem can also be problematic. In modern Western culture, self-esteem is often based on how much we are different from others, how much we stand out or are special. It is not okay to be average. We have to feel above average to feel good about ourselves. This means that attempts to raise self-esteem may result in narcissistic, self-absorbed behavior, or lead us to put others down in order to feel better about ourselves. We also tend to get angry and aggressive towards those who have said or done anything potentially makes us feel bad about ourselves. The need for high self-esteem may encourage us to ignore, distort, or hide personal shortcomings so that we can't see ourselves clearly and accurately. Finally, our self-esteem is often contingent on our latest success or failure, meaning that our self-esteem fluctuates depending on ever-changing circumstances. In contrast to self-esteem, self-compassion is not based on self-evaluations. People feel compassion for themselves because all human beings deserve compassion and understanding, not because they possess some particular set of traits, pretty, smart, talented, and so on. This means that with self-compassion, you don't have to feel better than others to feel good about yourself. Self-compassion also allows for greater self-clarity because personal failings can be acknowledged with kindness and do not need to be hidden. Moreover, self-compassion isn't dependent on external circumstances. It's always available, especially when you fall flat on your face. Research indicates that in comparison to self-esteem, self-compassion is associated with greater emotional resilience, more accurate self-concepts, more caring relationship behavior, as well as less narcissism and reactive anger. And all of that comes from selfcompassion.org, and it's self-compassion.org. That website has just an enormous amount of information on how to look after yourself properly.
I probably will put a link in the description because there were one or two moments where your audio seemed to glitch out. Maybe it was different for the viewers, but certainly for me. But that was extremely helpful. Kimberly O'Donnell said self-compassion is so very important. Paige Lundy said guilty. Diana Moreno said self-pity equals playing the victim. Oh,
yep.
So there's some interesting issues at the moment. I don't know who's done. I think we might have lost someone.
Oh dear.
Let's go to Kimmy. Kimmy, why did this relate to you in particular?
I think when we leave, I don't know why my camera is doing that. When we leave a high control group, our self-esteem is kind of wrapped up in us meeting the standards of that organization. And it's hard for us when we come out, like Sherry was talking about, self-esteem kind of changes. So we don't want to be guilty of having judged ourselves that way, but self-compassion, recognizing that we deserve, sorry, I don't know why the camera's doing that, you guys.
That's okay.
We deserve to give ourselves some allowance and give ourselves some room to grow and to feel and be forgiving with ourselves and not hold ourselves to such high standards. And I think that is probably such a hard thing to do when we first leave, a high control group.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether Sherry is back, but we're getting some interesting comments coming through. Doral Caminante says, Sherry, great advice on self-compassion. Very important for all of us. And Nilda Gomez says, great information we can all benefit from. Thanks, Sherry. And Darrell has actually dropped that link as well. So if it isn't in the description for any reason, you can always find the information on that address. So,
Darrell, have you ever met Arthur? Darrell, I think you live in the same part of the world, don't you?
Yes. Yes, we are.
Arthur, you know Darrell, don't you?
Yeah,
that's right.
Of course I know him.
Yeah.
We are close friends.
He's at Bethel or something?
Yeah, he's a Bethelite. Yeah.
So now we have a new segment that the panel aren't aware of in honor of our new guest. And I don't have an intro lined up yet, but we can always arrange that for the future. I'm calling it Auntie Bev's Bloody Corner.
The old cheese.
So, Auntie Bev, your mission is to say, give a monologue, and it can be anything, but you have to say bloody as much as possible.
You might get more than you bargained.
What do you think us Aussies are, Lloyd?
Well, I'm glad you're out of the bloody cult. One of the
I think Auntie Bev is finally speechless.
Bloody speechless.
What was the expression, Auntie Bev, you used in the interview that we did with Lloyd when you came on? Just straight off the top of your head, you said, was it, I'm glad you left the bloody junk shop? Referring to the Kingdom Hall?
Oh, yeah,
That
that's
was
right.
brilliant.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Brilliant.
I don't like to about the bloody Jehovah's Witnesses anyway. Give me the pip.
I'd say we all agree with you there.
So here's a question then. So the word bloody is, sort of growing up in the American culture. As a child, they used to say things like, over in the UK, if you say bloody, that's like saying the F word. So you guys, Lloyd, you're from Manchester. You guys are Australian. Can you guys set the record straight? What, on the scale of expletives, where is bloody?
We weren't allowed to say it in the UK, but it wasn't regarded as being as serious as the F word. So this was like saying crap, basically. If you said crap at the Kingdom Hall, everyone would give you very stern looks, and probably the same with bloody. But it wasn't the same as saying, the F word.
Yeah.
Well, where is bloody in relation to SH $$?
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
one
on a
on the
par.
Richter scale.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Because
have
I
to
want to
share
see
with
the
you guys.
comparison. Where because you
About
got
the same.
you've got the F word, and then you've got the SH word, and you've got bloody.
At this point, we need David Splain with a pointy stick pointing to a chart.
Let me tell you.
Lloyd's going to be demonetized for all this cussing.
Guys, at a book study in 2007 in 2007 we were studying the Revelation Climax book, and one of the sisters, one of the sisters said the F word as a part of a comment.
Oh, that is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah, really. Because,
Wow.
she wasn't actually. She was. I mean, I gave a comment about certain things related to foul language, and the sister asked in Romanian, but referring to the English word, "Is it the FU?"
You know,
Spelled out.
Arthur, we've got one that happened here with a brother giving a talk. It wasn't quite as serious as that, but it was a public talk, and he was relating the section from the Bible about the Egyptians pursuing the Israelites, and he was talking about how the Israelites were eagerly getting to the Red Sea, and the waters parted, and Jehovah was able to help them get through, and the Egyptians were right on their tail, and just as the Egyptians got into the waters crashed and killed the whole bloody lot of them. He got so worked up with he got so enthused with his talk that he kind of forgot where he was standing, and the audience just went, oh.
Yeah, you know, dear friends, I'm here in the bloody Kingdom Hall, and I'm thinking about this bloody episode of the Exodus, and that those waters at the Red Sea killing those bloody bastard Egyptians. God damn it!
Arthur, take your medication. Take your medication. We need you in one piece for the next segment.
So let me ask you: is it an expletive if you have, let's say, a Jehovah's Witness doctor who just performed a hip surgery, and he said, "I just performed a bloody hip surgery"?
No, used in context, it's not an expletive. If it literally is bloody, then you're allowed to say it.
He says that bloody surgery.
Yeah,
of course, it's a joke. But language is great.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree. I
got in trouble a lot for saying, crap. It was a euphemism. You weren't. Our language had to be.
Oh, well, there you go.
We weren't allowed to use certain.
Euphemism. So remember, that, and I don't know if you guys remember this, like from when I was growing up in the early 70s, we had the Theocratic Ministry School guidebook that came out, the 192-page brown book. And so that was, your speech qualities. And so that was a book you carried to every meeting, every Tuesday meeting or Thursday meeting. And they made a point in that book about euphemisms. And I know that from that time forward, in particular, and I'm sure there were lots of conservative JWs before then, but from that time and forward in particular, everyone was, especially the conservative JWs, said, "Oh, you cannot say gosh, golly, and gee." Because gosh and God, they're all euphemisms for God or Jesus, and that's highly disrespectful. And Lloyd's going to get some comments on this.
I remember.
People are going to say, "Oh yeah, I remember that. You can't say these euphemisms because they are replacements for the bad words."
Yep.
Carolyn,
I had one who said we had a sister in our congregation who used to say help, and she would say, "Oh help." Oh, help. And she got told off for help being a euphemism.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. So double hockey sticks.
Heck. Yeah.
Apparently, fart. It's wrong to say fart in some places, according to Carolyn's experience.
Yeah.
I can actually remember visiting New York for the first time. It would have been 2002. Or it might have been my next trip in 2003, but I can remember meeting kind of local witnesses and hearing the SH word. And I was kind of taken aback because that was one of the words that we absolutely weren't allowed to use as JWs in the UK. But in that part of New York, for some reason, it wasn't really frowned on as much. It was quite interesting. Yeah.
Well, let's bring Javier in on that one because he's a Brooklyn man, and he grew up as a JW in Brooklyn, and he certainly would understand the conservative and liberal approaches to language back then, because I think there is a certain element of the Jehovah's Witnesses that are very. The same one that would use the SH word would also be the one sneaking around watching the R-rated movies, or maybe even doing it in the open.
Probably.
And doesn't this just highlight? Sugar.
I'd say sugar. Oh, sorry.
Sugar. That's a good one.
If we have Auntie Bev's sugar corner, people might get confused as to what the show's about.
Yeah.
But you might get higher ratings.
But doesn't
Cooking
that
with
just
cats.
highlight? Yeah, the fact that as the organisation dictated what we could or couldn't say, it wasn't left up to us as individual grown-ups to decide what words we could use. It was up to an organisation or the culture of the local area to tell us what we could say. Not a cult or anything.
It's everything. You had to do everything that they said all the damn time.
Oh, the bloody time even.
I'm sorry I didn't get to meet you, Auntie Bev.
You did at the function. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at your home.
Bloody!
Yeah.
It's bloody! It's damn! It's shit even! Heavens to Murgatroyd!
Oh my god.
Careful, we're gonna
There goes all your money.
We're gonna
end up with a 3-month
what-
penalty.
I think what's
We need
happening
more
with
time.
Arthur is he's clearly has some energy to release.
Yeah,
So,
actually, you know.
probably
actually,
we
no,
should.
Sorry, Lloyd. Oh, before we turn to that part of the show, I wanted to add that
Here he is
you know
taking
this,
over again.
this
Like,
SH word. SH stands for Mankind's Search for God. It's the 2-letter acronym for the book. And IT is information technology. So shit would become man. Thank you, Lord, for cutting to the chase and introducing Sing Along with Arthur. Because you actually cut me right in the middle of the sentence when I was saying about mankind's search for information technology. And indeed, mankind has been fully utilizing information technology even for the coronavirus lockdown live streaming these days, and also for the upcoming summer regional conventions of Jehovah's Witnesses. Always be joyful, always rejoice, ladies and gentlemen.
I'll have what he's having.
So for this sing along with Arthur, let me invite you
Oh gosh.
to a lesson of geography.
Can we decline?
A lesson of geography to go to the ends of the earth and preach the good news of the kingdom.
Arthur, serious question. How many
Yes.
Red Bulls have you had before coming on the show?
I don't drink Red Bull.
He has Red Bull on an IV drip.
Red
So
Bull
I will-
infusion.
I would like to invite you to a trip to a geography lesson.
Oh, I
And
think
what-
we're all on a trip at this point.
Oh yeah.
And what better geography lesson would be better on a Saturday morning than from a very well-known song by Randy Rogel from 1993.
Who?
As Lloyd prepares the mute button, his finger poised over mute.
Oh, crumbs.
But I don't think I
We're
think
nothing
I,
but professional here.
I think I didn't press the. I didn't
This
press
is seamless so far, Arthur. Seamless.
audio. Okay. Now we should also have audio.
Okay, that's a relief.
Is it?
And now, the nations of the world with Yakko Warner. United States, Canada, Mexico, Panama, Haiti, Jamaica, Peru, Republic, Dominican, Cuba, Caribbean, Grenada, Salvador, too, Puerto Rico, Colombia, Venezuela, Honduras, Guyana, and still Guatemala, Bolivia, then Argentina, and Ecuador, Chile, Brazil, Costa Rica, Belize, Nicaragua, Bermuda, Bahamas, Tobago, San Juan, Paraguay, Suriname, and for Guyana, Barbados, and Guam. Norway and Sweden and Iceland and Finland, Germany now one piece, Switzerland, Austria, Czechoslovakia, Italy, Turkey and Greece, Poland, Romania, Scotland, Albania, Ireland, Russia, Oman, Bulgaria, Saudi Arabia, Hungary, Cyprus, Iraq, and Iran. There's Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, Russia, Kuwait, and Bahrain. The Netherlands, Luxembourg, Belgium, Portugal, France, Denmark, Spain. India, Pakistan, Burma, Afghanistan, Thailand, Nepal, and Bhutan, Cambodia, Malaysia, then Bangladesh, Asia, then China, Korea, Japan, Mongolia, Laos, Tibet, Indonesia,
I'm with you, Eric.
Islands, Taiwan, Sri Lanka, New Guinea, Sumatra, New Zealand, and then Borneo and Vietnam, Tunisia, Morocco, Uganda, Angola, Zimbabwe, Djibouti, Botswana, Mozambique, Zambia, Swaziland, Gambia, Nigeria, Ghana. Burundi, Lesotho, and Malawi, Togo. The Spanish Sahara is gone. Nigeria, Chad, and Liberia, Benin and Gabon, Tanzania, Somalia, Kenya and Mali, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Dahomey, Namibia, Senegal, Libya, Cameroon, Congo, Zaire, Ethiopia, Guinea-Bissau, Madagascar, Rwanda, Majorca, and Cayman, Hong Kong, Abu Dhabi, Qatar, Yugoslavia, Crete, Mauritania, then Transylvania, Monaco, Liechtenstein, Malta, Palestine, Fiji, Australia, Sudan.
Oh, wow.
I'm exhausted.
I'm
So
not
I guess we're gonna do the one-
completely sure what's just happened, to be honest. Mark,
Into
talk
all
us
the
through.
lands the
Talk
preaching would
us
take
through
place.
what we just experienced.
Well, I can tell you, if Arthur had been at our circuit overseer visit about 10 years ago, Kimmy will tell you, we had this circuit overseer come through that said, I'll bet no one could name, more than 5 countries in the world. This guy was probably the most ignorant circuit overseer we ever had. And he was literally dumb as a brick, but this guy said to the congregation, I don't even know what his point was, but he said, I bet you can't name, and he had people actually raising their hands.
And it was very little number too. Like you can't name 10
Right.
countries
Right.
that we preach in. And then half the congregation raised their hands.
Yeah, I don't know. But you know what? That's actually pretty cool, Arthur, that you, I don't know if you were reading or if you remembered that, but that's a great little thing for kids to remember the countries of the world.
Glowing praise there from Mark O'Donnell, Arthur.
It is.
Rob Paulson recorded this in one take when they recorded this segment for Animaniacs.
Really?
Back in 1993. Yeah, and Rob still does this piece at the Comic-Con events and so on.
Like Animaniacs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they are going to reboot Animaniacs with the original cast, like Rob Paulson, Fred McNeil, Jess Harnell, and Maurice LaMarche, and all the other very talented voice actors on Hulu this year.
Cool. You're fanning for sure.
Jay Proctor is giving you 32 out of 10, which I'm not even sure is mathematically possible, but there we go.
Because actually it's in binary, that's 1 and 5 zeros after it. So
okay. So yeah, I'm not really sure where to go from here, to be honest.
It's a mnemonic.
Songs?
I'd like to see Stephen Lett sing that song with a world map behind him when he's trying to preach and tell us how the kingdom work is expanding in
United States, Canada, Mexico, Panama, Haiti, Jamaica, Peru.
He wouldn't be able to.
It's a reprise.
It just keeps on giving.
It doesn't end. He's like the Energizer Bunny. We love you, Arthur.
Well, now we can't talk about anything serious.
Children are high maintenance.
Mine.
In the very final part of the last day.
The final part.
And we just triggered everyone.
Yes.
Well, I'm still speechless, to be honest, after that, Arthur. So thank you for that.
Let me take you somewhere then. While we're all trying to catch our breath, you talk about crazy COs and crazy sorts of things that district overseers and circuit overseers used to say when they would visit congregations. One of the biggest things that used to tick us all off was their use of anecdotal experiences to try and prove that Jehovah was blessing the work. I got one the other day. I am still on a text message circular list of one of the most well-known district overseers, circuit overseers that was on the work for 30 plus years in Australia, and somehow he still keeps texting me. And he sent through this really long, yeah, I won't read the whole lot, but he sent through a long experience that was supposedly proof that Jehovah would answer the prayers of his faithful people. And basically it was a story about a couple that wanted to have a child but couldn't. They prayed to Jehovah. They decided they would adopt. But in the meantime, they got contacted in the door-to-door ministry by one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and they heard the message and they became witnesses. Then they get a contact from the adoption agency saying, we have a child for you, but there's no babies available to be adopted. But if you'll take a child who's 7 or 8 years old, you'll be able to adopt. They might come from a country where underprivileged country. So the experience says, well, they made it a matter of prayer, and with mixed emotions, they went home and they thought about it. They decided they could go ahead with the adoption because the child would be in school most of the day, so it wouldn't interfere with their plans to serve Jehovah and pioneer. They go and pick the kid up from the adoption agency. The child comes home. He's really upset. He doesn't want to be there until he sees that they left a My Book of Bible Stories on his bedside table. His face lights up. He gets all excited because apparently his parents were witnesses back in Vietnam. He identifies that this is the truth. And the district overseer goes on to say, never think that Jehovah doesn't answer prayers, even those of a little child. I went and did some research. Apparently, this same experience was trotted out by the Mormons with a slightly different twist to it. And it's been used by other sorts of fundamental groups to prove that, God will always bless effort. So it made me do a bit of research into anecdotal experiences that are given. And back to this trusty book, The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, it talked about the way that we need to be so careful about anecdotal stories or experiences that are given to try and prove a point and evidence that perhaps there might be a divine entity backing or guiding. And this is a point that a lot of people have come up with. They've said, why would the society promote or allow these sorts of experiences to be spread from the platform? The book said, does a purveyor of obvious nonsense do so because they are a con artist or a true believer? Are they doing this to fraudulently mislead people, or do they genuinely believe the stories that they spread? Or do the stories just become so common and spread to such a degree that they can no longer distinguish fact from fiction? So I just thought, put it in context, we used to hear all these stupid little stories that would get spread amongst the organisation. Half the time they weren't really true, or they were embellished stories.
Now we have the ones that the governing body and other ranking members are putting out there on JW Broadcasting, and I think Lloyd, you covered recently the one. Maybe you can refresh us on the guy who said that the fact that the radio broadcast of the which meeting was it that was broadcast in Africa was evidence of Jehovah's blessing, and it all happened within this short period of time where they were able to get the meeting, the special meeting broadcast.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah, there was something
television.
about it. There was a coronavirus update. They now call them the governing body updates. And there was a third one hosted by Kenneth Cook. And they were basically indulging in a backpatting exercise about how in certain parts of Africa they'd managed to get the memorial broadcast on the television just in the nick of time. The brothers were negotiating right up to the 11th hour, and then phone calls needed to go out to say it's on this channel, and isn't it marvelous that Jehovah provides? And I think one of the very next uploads to JW.org was talking about Kenneth Cook's experience of going to open he was going to dedicate the new facilities in Greece. And a whole bunch of that particular video was about how he and his wife had been late to attend the dedication because of bad weather. Their flight got delayed. So on the one hand, they're talking about, it was Jehovah arranged for the memorial to be broadcast just in the nick of time. And in almost the very next video, they're saying Jehovah didn't allow us to get to the dedication just in the nick of time, but it was still evidence of Jehovah's blessing and that kind of thing.
Good things, bad things.
Exactly, yeah.
This is the disturbing thing, that so many bad things happen in relation to Jehovah's organization. And, you know, you don't have to look far. For example, the Philippines, we know what Mark Sanderson went over to the Philippines after they had those major devastating hurricanes, right? So he goes over there, and I believe there were maybe about a dozen witnesses who were inside of a kingdom hall that were killed. And what's interesting, when you look at when you compare the numbers of Jehovah's Witnesses to population, and you extrapolate that to the number of actual people who were killed in the Philippines during the hurricane, the Jehovah's Witnesses would have been on par with the average as far as the number of people that were killed due to the hurricane, except for the fact that there were an extra 12 people that were killed inside that kingdom hall in the Philippines. So that meant that the ratio was much higher for Jehovah's Witnesses being killed in the Philippines. So how was it that Jehovah was protecting his people when those extra 12 people represented a higher percentage of Jehovah's Witnesses dying due to the hurricane compared to the population? And, you know, it just makes you wonder, well, is there some kind of, this is what witnesses believe, there's some kind of divine protection. But then when that doesn't work out, they go to the scriptures and say, well, time and unforeseen occurrence befall them all. And I know that scripture has been rewritten in the New World Translation, but we grew up with Ecclesiastes 9:5? Time and unforeseen occurrence will befall them all. Well, time and unforeseen occurrence befell them in a big way in the Philippines. And of course, we could go on all day about.
But you're forgetting, Mark. You're forgetting that Jehovah blessed them with an abundance of sand to build kingdom halls from that very same. Yeah.
You could go on all day. It's all a big word salad, and you can throw this experience together. You can use anything to prove anything, and that's the difficulty.
I will continue to hold the organization accountable for what happened in the Philippines, because I take your point, Mark, that, you know, if not for what happened in that one kingdom hall, perhaps the numbers would be in line with the ratios and what have you. But bottom line, the official directions at that time were evacuate to higher ground, get away from the coastal areas, because there's a storm surge coming. And in the face of that clear direction, you had Jehovah's Witnesses huddled together in kingdom halls under some kind of assumption that they would have divine protection there, and it cost them their lives.
I would also add that during the coronavirus, we've heard stories from all over the place, and I've gotten a lot of inside emails from people who are active witnesses in different countries who have told me that witnesses have been told to hoard and store food. And when the government specifically said not to, don't hoard the toilet paper, don't hoard the food. And I remember mentioning this recently to, you know, my mother, who is an active witness. And she goes all the way back to 1975, and she says, "Oh, I remember Earl Southard. He was really big into 1975. In fact, he was. And by the way, they lived right down the street from us, and their his wife's grandson is David Schaefer, the governing body helper. But Earl was this witness, who was Naomi's wife, and so they were preaching 1975. So just prior to 1975, he was hoarding tons of food. And my mom said, I didn't understand it. Even Naomi was upset about the amount of food he was hoarding. And she said, in the end, it all went bad up in the attic.
Wow.
Up in the attic.
Eric Larson says, did Arthur get the ultimate mute? To answer that question, here is Arthur, who seems to be on the run from the authorities, as far as I can tell. Yeah.
Yes. Actually, I got a a copyright notice from Warner Brothers for infringing on their Animaniacs.
So the copyright police are
segment.
after you as we speak, it seems.
Yes.
Okay.
And I had to leave my studio, but everything else is in order.
Reporter.
Well, we've got man on the scene, Arthur Weber. Arthur, tell us what you're seeing now. There's pandemonium in Romania. I know you're on the ground.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to report from the scene of the. I'm investigating here in this neighborhood. It's pretty much no people, no nothing, no population, just some empty buildings and construction sites behind me, and it's obvious that it's a fast pandemonium coronavirus post-lockdown situation. Thank you for reporting, Roger. I'm out of here.
I think
Back to the studio.
I think Arthur has been called somewhere. He's has an urgent social engagement that he needs to attend. But we thank Arthur for his performance today. It was a very memorable sing along with Arthur. So thank you, Arthur. Oh, crumbs!
Oh, the wild dogs are loose in Romania.
Goodness knows what we're seeing at this point, viewers.
Arthur's been turned into a dog.
You've lost all control of the show, Lloyd.
Okay. Well, Arthur,
tell us
again.
about the wild dogs.
You're welcome. Yeah, that's. Yeah, Ding was really very very pressing with having to go out.
Did your dog need a wee? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. That kind of makes sense. Well, listen. Have a nice walk, and I hope your dog relieves itself fully. And if we're still broadcasting when you get back, we look forward to seeing you.
All right.
All right. Take care, mate.
You too.
Bye.
See you guys.
I think the dog heard that.
Yeah.
Heard Arthur's.
That has to be a
I'm out
first.
of here.
That's a first for the lockdown live stream where we've lost a panelist due to a dog's toiletry needs. But there we go.
When you gotta go, you gotta go.
You do, in fairness. And an apartment's no place for dog urine swishing around, I would imagine. So
Like, if you
that's
care,
a nice.
put down the urine pad, you know.
Yeah, Lancer Choate says, "Gotta walk the dog." And Eric Larson says, "I'm just happy to see the dog alive because after all, usually when we see that dog, it is in a horizontal position and looking suspiciously dead." So, latching on to what you were saying earlier, Mark, we have this comment from Bob Oak. In response to Lip Lock No More, I would also have accepted 1918, 1925, Armageddon before the end of the last century. The generation teaching that that doesn't make sense, Bob Oak.
He makes a good point.
Overlapping.
And
There's an obvious link though to what Mark was saying, don't you think, Mark?
What's his point?
Overlapping generations.
It was probably one of the worst segues I've ever come up with for the show. But it's true that the organization has been putting out some crazy propaganda recently. I'm glad that you reminded me about that stuff about the Greece branch dedication video. I was this close to doing a video about it. But other things came up, and I'm actually probably my next video is going to be another taking on Tony, because have you seen his latest video? He has a really, really weird part in his latest morning worship video where he talks about sleeping in the woods. It's hilarious. So if you'd have to watch it. But he's talking all about. Basically, he's trying to get people all excited about the paradise, and he shows an illustration from, I think it's
There's Paradise
from one of the latest
Right.
Jehovah's Pure Worship Restored book or something like that. He shows an illustration anyway of a young girl sleeping under a tree in the paradise with a panther above her. I'm not making this up. With a panther above her and an owl nearby. And at one point he says, and when you look at this picture and you focus in on, and you can see he's gonna say, that's it. When you focus in on the beautiful, and then he changes it to picture, when you can kind of tell he was gonna say the beautiful young girl. But he says, when you focus in on the beautiful picture, and his argument is you miss the fact that there's a panther above her and there's an owl here. And then he does this really weird thing where he starts to guess what the panther might be thinking and what the owl might be thinking.
Oh, yeah.
Honestly,
they had a frontal cortex.
It's one of the weirdest things I think I've ever seen, because he just goes off on this crazy tangent about how in the paradise we'll finally be able to sit in the woods and not be bothered by wild animals. That's his point. That's his selling pitch, basically, for the massacre of Armageddon. At least we'll be able to go into the woods and sit under a tree with a panther above us. It's crazy. You'd have to watch it.
Lloyd, I don't think Carney Bev knows anything about Tomo.
Really?
The bottle.
You might have to. You do know about.
We'll do some catch up.
She met Tony in Sydney at your event.
Tony Morris gave us a delivery of Scotch whiskey. Do you know it's
delivered Scotch?
Almost?
Yeah.
Yes. But you've never seen him deliver.
So here's my question, Lloyd. You know, Tony's your favorite, all-time favorite governing body member, right? So, and you guys are very close. You've spoken to him on the phone.
I have had the conversation with him. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So you guys go way back. You're tight. But look,
years, you could say.
Years.
Tight's not the word we use for
it. Well, at least the pants are tight. The stretch pants are tight. Something is tight in that relationship. Something. But look, Tony is uncensored and raw. I mean, he used the branch, or what was it? Yeah, the branch dedication. The annual branch meeting in the U.S. Over 1.5 million people from the U.S. were listening into that for the famous tight pants talk, where he spews all this ridiculous nonsense, completely off script. This is nothing that the writing department ever put down. This was Tony talking about patterned socks and tight pants and how old you have to, and Spanx, and oh my God. So my question is, he is so uncensored and off script at times, most of the time. What are these 7 other men going to do? Are they going to be able to curtail him? Because you don't have 7 other necessarily stable men. You've got David Splain, with his pointer, who thinks he's the architect of all things, all brainiac things in the organization.
He knows how to do the math. Yeah.
He's the math professor. When I'm sure he probably couldn't do basic algebra. Then you've got. Oh my God! I mean, so you've got seven, right? Jeffrey Jackson, the delusional Australian, crazy man. Mm-hmm. But who's going to rein in Tony? Because Tony's getting older and he's drinking a lot. Obviously, look, he's been caught. I don't know if Auntie Bev knows this, but he bought over $1,000 worth of expensive. Yeah. So I did say that. Yeah, and of course you met him in Sydney. But that's my question is, so how are they going to bring it down? How are they going to de-escalate Tony when you've got 7 other men that are, is it going to be Cook that comes in? Is he going to be the guy that reigns in during the governing body meeting and say, Tony, it's finally time for you to, step down from speaking?
Yeah, I think there's a power imbalance on the governing body, and it's been very interesting doing the governing body Who's Who videos with Phil, Blue Envelope, and with Jay the Comedian, because it's been very interesting to notice patterns in the appointments of all the different governing body members. One thing that we very quickly realized is that virtually all of the current governing body members have been through the service department. You need to go through the service department and see the organization at its very worst and be okay with it. And then you're in with a chance of rising up the ranks. So there's definitely a very noticeable trend in the sort of people who are getting appointed. As far as I'm concerned, Tony Morris got appointed to begin with because he was Watchtower's pit bull, always was, willing to push the Watchtower line, even the more grotesque elements of Watchtower theology. Look, Tony Morris has always been a cheerleader for. But when it comes to the most recent appointments, men like Mark Sanderson, men like Kenneth Cook, what's noticeable is that they're picking people who don't have charisma, who don't really have a great deal of force about them, and who therefore can basically do the bidding of people like Tony Morris and people like Stephen Lett and people like David Splain. They seem to be picking people who don't really have much about them and therefore don't pose too much of a threat to the bigger personalities on the governing body. So I think that there is a bit of a power imbalance on the governing body, and it will be fascinating to see what direction the governing body goes in once some of these charismatic leaders have moved on to the heavenly realm.
And you know, you make a good point. You think about all people in power. When there's a bully in power, it's very hard for the people under him or her to stand up. And if they do stand up and perhaps call out that leader, they get moved on or they get kicked out of office. So when you've got a bully at the helm of any organization or country, problems will ensue.
Yeah. Brandon Fiquette, who is watching, says tofu governing body members. I think that pretty much describes it, to be honest. Right. They are fairly bland and featureless, but they fill the numbers and they toe the line. And that certainly describes Mark Sanderson and Ken Cook, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Can I just mention we've got somebody viewing or somebody watching in, Eric Wells from Recovering from Religion.
Eric
is watching as well. So just want to pass on.
Eric says, has the JW org put out any sort of Black Lives Matter statement? In fact, it would be interesting if, Mark, can you tell us what they've been doing on that side of things with what they've been putting out on JW.org?
Oh boy, you talking about my tweets and art?
I'm talking. Yeah, exactly. So they've basically been jumping on it as a headline for their website.
So so and I don't know if you noticed this or not, Lloyd, but so of course you know about the fact that they put the protest article on the cover of JW.org. I think what does it say? Is protesting the answer?
Yeah.
But did you know they changed the image within like 2 days?
Yeah. So it was originally a black man front center who was like depicted as protesting, and they've since changed it to white people protesting.
Oh wow!
So what? Yeah, and what really is irritating about the whole thing? So they have this article on the cover of. In fact, I'm going to check now just to make sure that it's still on the front of the JW.org website. So it says, is protest the answer? So now they've got a crowd, a mixed crowd with a white man front and center who looks a bit like Jason Wynn, by the way. So they've got a white man front and center, but then there's some black people and other persons of color in the background, and they're angry. But what I think a lot of people don't realize, and I didn't realize this at first until I clicked on the article and looked at it, but this is an old article that they've recycled from I think 2012, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So what they did was they are hijacking this protest theme that's going on and saying, is protest the answer? But then what I discovered is that
and their answer is
no.
Yeah, their answer to everything is God's kingdom is the answer. To all mankind's ailments. But I was looking for my tweet, because I tweet stuff and forget that I tweet it. But so what I found was, and someone else had mentioned this, and I went and got my bound volume from 1999. And I could even put that on screen, but we're kind of running out of time. But the Watchtower of August 1st, 1999 had a Kingdom Proclaimers report in which they discuss how Jehovah's Witnesses went to the streets of France and distributed millions and millions of copies of a protest document that they created, the Jehovah's Witness organization created in protest of their treatment by the government in France. Because what had happened was France had called them a cult. They levied a 60% tax on them. They hit them where they hurt the most, in their pocketbook. And so the Jehovah's Witnesses said, time to protest. So they literally went to the streets, and instead of carrying big signs, they used their printing facilities to print millions of these tracts, and they handed them out to, I mean, in ridiculous numbers. If you read this article, it says here, let's see, where's the number on this? It says millions of tracts were given out on the first day. In Paris alone, by midday, over 7,000 witnesses had put more than 1.3 million tracts in the hands of people. Seeing so many witnesses giving out tracts on the streets was certainly a first for the people. And earlier in this article, this is again Watchtower, August 1st, 1999. The article says, unbelievably, even the religious contributions they have received have been assessed a 60% tax. How did the campaign deal with this discrimination? So it's amazing to me that, you know, in a relatively recent period of time, and I think a lot of us remember the France protest, and actually this is tightly linked with the fact that the Jehovah's Witness organization had a 9-year relationship with the United Nations, because they were suffering in France and in other European countries. They were being called a cult, and the Jehovah's Witnesses wanted to legitimize their organization. And the best way they felt they could do it at the time in Europe was to say that they agreed with the ideals of the United Nations and join them as an NGO, or a non-governmental organization. And it wasn't until 9 years into that being an NGO with the UN, which, by the way, is the organization that is the 8th world power, is evil in God's eyes. 9 years into that, a journalist was tipped off, and he broke the story, and Watchtower immediately retracted their membership in the United Nations as an NGO. So all of this was going on, but they were not afraid to take to the streets and protest with millions of tracts in France. And of course, we heard about it here in the US. And I've seen I don't have a copy of the tract here, but maybe I can post it somewhere. But it was in French. And it was in fact the organization legitimizing protesting. Yet when it comes to Black Lives Matter, the organization says, no, we can't fix that problem. No. God's kingdom can only fix that problem. But money problems, don't touch our money. But Black Lives Matter, that doesn't matter. God's kingdom needs to fix that. So it's really a double standard.
Wouldn't that also be true to see the way that they organized 8 million plus people to write multiple letters to the Russian government, of course, as we know, in the last couple of years. So again, so far, so much for keeping politically neutral and not protesting governmental directions. Here we Jehovah's Witnesses, being told to write multiple letters to the Russian government.
So here is the website at the moment. You can see there it says, is protest the answer? Protest can be a powerful force for change. Originally, I think it said originally, is protest the answer, and then just the button. And I think they've kind of realized that, it's very clearly just piggybacking on a very sensitive issue for many people, including many Jehovah's Witnesses. So they seem to have added more text since this current crisis began. Protest can be a powerful force for change, but is it the solution to injustice, corruption, and oppression? Get the answer. And in answer to Eric Wells's question, the answer ultimately will always be God's kingdom, which entails basically the annihilation of anyone who isn't a Jehovah's Witness. That's ultimately the answer. But you only really get that answer once you've devoted lots of time and energy and you've become emotionally invested. And then after a while, and after lots of Bible study sessions, gradually it all starts to quote unquote make sense. So.
My question, Lloyd, is why they've got a massive writing department, they've got a massive publishing department, they've got hundreds and hundreds of people that are working on JW.org at all times. Why can't they produce a new article relevant to what's going on right now and even mention George Floyd's name? They won't mention him because he's nothing to them. He's a worldly person. Well, he does not matter. His life does not matter. What matters is God's kingdom, is what they're saying. And that really irritates me that they can't put a new article up that's relevant to the times we're living in now and say something that is politically correct, because, of course, they're not politically correct. And it's very upsetting that they just recycle and throw up. Hey, protest. Great. We've got an article from 2012. Let's throw that up on our website.
They've
very
always
insensitive.
News jacking. They're taking advantage of the news, and then they did the same thing with the disaster stuff. Remember, they recycled the article on disasters and threw that on their website, and then even were sharing that around, in their preaching work.
Yeah, because they know they have nothing relevant to say, so they're going to recycle this old article.
And they've done it all along. I can remember. Not long after September 11th, they came out with an Awake article, I think it was, on terrorism.
Yes.
And I can actually remember, this is hilarious. I've only just remembered it now. I can remember I was pioneering at the time, and I was, I think, working by myself because I didn't have a partner at the time. So I was going around people's houses with a magazine about terrorism in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, and someone called the police on me. so this cop car kind of drives up and says, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" So I said, "Well, I'm a Jehovah's Witness. I'm calling on people with these magazines." And he said, "We've had a report that someone's going around saying terrorism to people and talking about terrorism." So yeah, it's very interesting how they do it. They've been doing this for years, basically piggybacking on relevant issues, and rather than addressing things properly and fully understanding what's happening and the sensitivities of what's happening, and make no mistake, there will be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Jehovah's Witnesses who are directly affected by the issues that are currently in play at the moment. There will be, I was mentioning Harlem. My friends who I first met, who were Jehovah's Witnesses when I first came to America, that was a black community, and they will be directly affected in that particular community that I first encountered with the issues at stake. Watchtower's answer will always be, everyone who's not a Jehovah's Witness needs to die before we can sort these problems out. That is not a solution. Killing billions of people is actually worse than the situation that we have at the moment. So, it's shameful the way they piggyback off these situations.
Yeah.
I would like to challenge our listeners or anyone who sees this video at some point in time, if you have a platform, and even if you don't, but particularly if you have a platform, whether it's a website, a YouTube channel, social media, you've got some followers on social media, use your platform to show whose side you're on, because your silence could be construed as complicity with the things that are ruining our culture. We need people to understand where we stand on this. And I've seen I'm very proud of majority of my friends in the ex-Jehovah's Witness community, if there is such a community. It's just a loose, collection of people. But I'm very proud that most of the people that are on my friends list are people who are in support of Black Lives Matter and other important issues like Me Too, because we have to talk about these. We have to dialogue them. I've noticed some persons, unfortunately, are conspicuously silent, and that are activists who have platforms and that are conspicuously silent because we know what side of the issue they're on. And there are racist ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. There are people who believe in things that are destructive to society. And I think many of them with platforms that are on that side are keeping their mouths shut because they know that they could lose everything if they come out on the wrong side of this. You do not want to be on the wrong side of this issue. We have to move forward.
If I could just say something, Mark, because I really appreciate you saying that. I was kind of hoping I could get through this show without talking about this, but this does need to be,
I know.
It needs to be said. And so, look, with the John Cedars channel and with the Watchtower in Focus episodes and with the coronavirus lockdown live stream, we always make it a point to, as far as possible, remain politically neutral. I am, to be completely honest with you, I just don't care what people's politics are. We have a broad spectrum of politics, even on the JWsurvey team. Covert Fade voted for Brexit. Anyone who knows me well will know I absolutely cannot stand Brexit, but we're still fantastic friends with each other. You know, political differences aren't a thing for me personally. But when it comes to Black Lives Matter, this is not a political thing. This is a societal thing. This is a case of injustice. If you were around during the time of the American Civil War, you wouldn't hopefully be saying, oh, well, let's just listen to what the Confederates have to say. There's two sides to this slavery argument, you know. You don't want to be buying into what the mainstream media and Abraham Lincoln have to say about slavery. Let's hear the Confederate. No, there was a good side and there was a bad side. And thankfully, in the American Civil War, the good side won. Same thing with World War II. You could conceivably, with the current toxic dialogue on Twitter, if Twitter had been around in the 1940s, I can imagine people saying, oh, don't buy into what the mainstream media is saying about the Holocaust. There's two sides to this story. You know, people actually do say that now about the Holocaust. Again, it was a case of evil. You need to take a stand when there is evil. I would love to know what people's possible reasons could be for being against the very simple message, Black Lives Matter. What is your problem with that? And yes, people say, oh, but all lives matter. Yes, of course. Black Lives Matter doesn't mean that all lives don't matter. It means that there is this particular demographic that has been facing oppression and injustice and discrimination for decades, and now is the moment to do something about it. How could you possibly be against that? It's like, I was thinking about this today. Could you imagine if in Star Wars you had this movement saying, don't believe what the mainstream media has to say about the destruction of Alderaan. Who knows what the full story is? Just because one planet was destroyed, that doesn't mean the Empire intends to destroy other planets, you know. You can imagine all sorts of dialogue, and that's the sort of toxic dialogue that is being spread by the alt-right on social media right now about George Floyd. Oh, well, we don't know what sort of person George Floyd was. Do you realize he did X, Y, Z? It doesn't matter. The man was murdered over $20, and that is not okay.
Right.
In front of people.
In front of people.
And nobody,
There's a systemic problem in society that needs to be fixed. And if you are against that, then quite frankly, how can you possibly say, as an ex-Jehovah's Witness, but I'm against abuse by cults? How can you be so petty as to say, oh, I want to take a stand for human rights when it comes to cults. I'm not so bothered about the plight of black people. You know, if for me personally, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses are uniquely positioned to show compassion on this subject, because we know what it means to fight against a system that's corrupt. We know what it means to be ignored. And quite frankly, how do we expect to be taken seriously with the very serious questions we're asking about shunning and about child abuse if we're operating in an overall system that doesn't recognize fully the rights of black people? How do we expect to leapfrog that whole issue? You have to fix society before you can start to address some of the extremely nuanced things we're asking for. So I see it all as part of the same issue. I don't see it as political. I see it as purely a case of good versus evil. And as Mark says, when history looks back on this period, you know, do you really want to be turning to future generations and saying, well, I was ambivalent, I was indifferent to that whole thing? You want to be able to say, no, I took a stand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lloyd, and I thank you for the post yesterday. I think it was yesterday. It's a highly controversial. It shouldn't be controversial.
It shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be. It's very straightforward.
No, but for those that haven't seen it, on Facebook, Lloyd posted about this viral video from this woman named Candace Owens, who is an extreme right conservative. That's in favor. But she is opposed to Black Lives Matter. She is using all of these ridiculous arguments to say that George Floyd is not a martyr. Well, no one ever said George Floyd. No one ever set him up as a martyr. That's stretching the truth. Straw man. That's a straw man argument. What they're saying is that what happened to George is systematic of the problems we have in our culture with police brutality, with racism. We've got to deal with these problems. I don't care that George Floyd had some problems in his past. That is irrelevant. When you see a man pinned down, handcuffed on the ground, he's already in police custody, and then you put your knee on his neck and you kill him. That is disgusting. That is nothing to do with politics. That is nothing to do with all of these other ancillary issues that this Candace Owens is spewing. And by the way, you don't have to go any further than her Wikipedia page to see that the facts of who she is and who she represents and who she's defending. Even statements, defending some of Hitler's actions, and I got to be careful when I say that, because you've got to read what she did and what she said. There's a whole string of things, but she's absolutely a Trump supporter, and I don't care what your politics are, And Lloyd, you said it very well. But what matters is this one thing that we're talking about, Black Lives Matter. That's something we've got to fix in our country, and we've got to fix it worldwide. So
I can't stand. Sorry, go on, Kimmy.
No, I was just saying it's been very nice to see everyone worldwide, how the protests are happening, peaceful protests are happening in all these different countries. And I think that's pretty amazing that people are coming together,
And I think I've said enough, but when it comes to Donald Trump, it's no secret I cannot stand the guy, but I'm not gonna shut you out just because you happen to think he's some amazing guru. And I've had conversations with people who I'm still friends with, who for some reason think that he's some kind of genius. He's just pretending that he's a total narcissistic moron. But I can get on with people. I look at it as, okay, you've fallen for a particular narrative. It doesn't make you a bad person. This is what I was trying to say earlier. It's not about the politics. I can understand people being enamored by Donald Trump because I understand how charisma works, and I've seen how effective charisma can be in the context of my upbringing and my background. So I'm not going to write people off because they're Republican, because they're conservative, because they support Donald Trump. For as far as I'm concerned, none of that matters when we're dealing with people are being beaten and killed who shouldn't be. That's the bottom line. If you are pro people being indiscriminately beaten and killed, then you're a bad person. I'm sorry, it's just as simple as that, Or
even if you're not pro, but if you fail to take action, it's no different than watching a child in the middle of the road and sitting back and going, well, it's not really my place to get involved. It is. If you see something and you need to act on it and you fail to act, I know that triggers a scriptural thing, but you've got to take a stand. And we're not talking about political allegiances. It just happens to be that sometimes these issues overlap. But very simply, what value do we put on human life? And do we understand that no group deserves to be oppressed and every person deserves the respect, and Black Lives Matter? Do we respect that, or are we trying to muddy the waters and tie it up with a political issue?
We've got to listen to the other side if we find ourselves on the wrong side. We've got to be open-minded. I remember the very first time I heard this phrase, we all heard it, excuse me, we all heard it for the first time once, right? We all heard it for the first time. What was our first gut reaction? I heard this phrase, Black Lives Matter. My initial reaction was, oh, that doesn't make sense. All lives matter. That was my first reaction, okay? Because I was ignorant. I didn't know. That was my gut reaction. So then I looked into it, you know, and I talked to Kimmy about it, and I looked it up, and then I realized I get it now. You only figure this out if you're willing to listen to what Black Lives Matter is saying, listen to your Black friends, listen to those who are talking about it on both sides, and then you come to a logical conclusion that, oh, this makes sense to me now, just like the Me Too movement makes sense. They corrupted what Me Too is all about. All right. Yeah. But if you understand what they're actually saying, then you will come to a comprehension of, I get it now, and I want to be on the right side of this. You've got to listen.
Yeah.
Yeah, we always have
Mark, not time to be silent.
Yeah, I saw a very good post on Facebook. Somebody said, if somebody came to you and said, a family member has breast cancer, do you respond and go, well, all cancers are bad? No, you give them the support for that particular cancer. And it's no different. There is a particular issue being highlighted now, and that needs the attention that it deserves. Yeah.
So I hope viewers, and we still have 88 watching, so clearly what we're saying isn't that bad. Again, it's not, as far as I'm concerned, it's not controversial. It's just a simple case of standing up for what's right. I would be just as outspoken as I'm sure everyone would be if the lockdown live stream were happening during the 1940s and we were talking about the Holocaust. It would be the same thing for the American Civil War. At certain points in history, evil proliferates, and it's only managed by good people taking a stand for what's right. But I've really enjoyed being joined by all of you on the panel today. It's certainly been a roller coaster ride of a variety of different subjects and tones. But
cats and dogs.
And we've had, yes, we've had cats and dogs. So if YouTube is trying to determine the meaning of this video, it should be noted that this has been predominantly a pet video and a video
and an
about
80th birthday.
And an 80th birthday video for Auntie Bev.
And happy birthday to my friend Jason.
Thank you, darling.
Happy birthday to Jason. Happy birthday to Auntie Bev, who turns 18. Yeah, so that's fantastic. And has quite a few admirers in the live chat apparently. So
yeah, thanks to everyone's comments on the live chat too. There was no doubt a heap of comments again, and yeah. Like we've always said, this is
to her next bloody corner.
Yeah,
I would really like to see Auntie Bev's bloody corner. So maybe we can make that happen. We'll have talks with Auntie Bev. We'll have talks with Auntie Bev's people to see what we can arrange.
For the next one.
Thanks so much, folks. As always, please remember, stay safe, stay positive. We will be back on Wednesday for the next coronavirus lockdown live stream. But it's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll see you in the next show.